Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphanlast, aka Skylar Madison, and welcome to the 51 Animation Challenges, where I'm tackling the challenge of animating a full-bodied character, changing his expression multiple times. And as you can see, I've been using a video reference. If you guys have been following the series, you know that. And on the screen currently, what you're looking at is my work that I've done throughout the last few weeks. You can see this motion blur towards the end of the animation that just looks terrible. And I'm thinking about doing away with it and seeing what it looks like without any type of motion blur there. It's kind of a tricky thing to know just how far the character can be until you actually need to have some sort of blur effect applied in your method. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out so far. I think that there are some tricky things to figure out because there is a temptation to do moving holds when you draw from a reference image, when you could very easily get away with a hold. For those of you that don't know what a moving hold is versus a moving hold is where a character is moving very little, and yet each and every single frame is being animated to show that little bit of movement. It's a little bit of subtlety. Whereas a hold is where you just expose one frame for a period of time. And that frame could be applied to one column, multiple columns. It kind of depends on what's going on and how you're animating it, whether it's traditional or cutout animation or whatever. One feature that I'm kind of falling in love with is the shift and trace feature. Now, I've been talking about the shift and trace feature and such like that for quite a while now. And what I'd like to say is if you're finding difficulty keeping the movement, the consistency of all these tiny objects, such as a character's hand, keeping that consistent, it can be pretty difficult. And so if you're having difficulty with that, I would suggest using shift and trace because it's very, very intuitive. You can use it for a lot more than that, especially when you have an in-between that's so far away from one keyframe to another keyframe. I suppose at that point you could just decide, okay, this is going to be a breakdown, and then just draw whatever you want there if it's so far away. But it has to make sense. I personally found that doing the shift and trace method was extremely useful, especially while also in concert using it with a video reference. Now, in my last video, I actually mentioned a feature that I'd like to see inside of the shift and trace feature. And actually that feature already exists, and Darren T made a pretty good video talking about how it works and how to use it and all that. If you are interested in that, go ahead and take a look at the card in the upper right corner of the screen. It should be there right now. It's just a really nice, short and sweet tutorial on how to use a feature that I thought was just a twinkle in my eye when I made the previous video in this series. So here I go ahead and slow down the video to kind of further describe another little quick statement that I made in the previous video. Here, I'm trying to in-between on ones, and this can get difficult. Even regardless if you're animating on ones or twos, it's frustrating because you have to move your keyframes around in order to flip properly. And here I made a column called dump so that I could just dump frames into it occasionally, and you can actually see me moving the keyframes. The keyframes have a note level underneath them. So this allows me to flip in between my keyframe, the middle position in between that I'm wanting to address, and then the other keyframe. And then I wind up moving them all back into position later on. But even still, having to create a column just for the sake of dumping frames is kind of annoying. Now, there is a little bit of a workaround to this. I guess you could go ahead and use shift and trace and just reset the shift and traces and just treat them as if they're onion skins. And just use F1, F2, F3 in order to flip real quick, if that appeals to you. It kind of does appeal to me, but, you know, Darren T's video came out so recently that I didn't know about that when I was making this video. I'll try it out next week and let you guys know what I think, or whether or not I just feel as though it would be nice to see something with the onion skin so that I could flip from the red keyframe to the in-between that I want to work on to the green keyframe really quick. It would be nice to have the F1, F2, F3 work for the onion skins. It just would. But of course, I understand that might actually be nearly impossible because you could actually have an infinite number of onion skins turned on. And so how to get the logic to work, I understand that might be impossible. It'd just be nice to see maybe something happen with it. That's all I'm saying with that. But who knows? Maybe I might just fall in love with using shift and trace for that particular task. Now here you see me kind of animate this elongated face, and I also have a frame where I wrote out anticipation squish, and it just seemed like I had a bunch of frames where this head was elongated, and it just gets really elongated, and then it goes back to normal, and then it elongates again to finish the movement. I know that sounds really convoluted, it's a mouthful and all that, but even still, it just looked terrible. That's just another way of saying it looked terrible. So I decided, okay, I need to go back to this. I need to fix why this looks wrong. And so I went ahead and drew out the arc of the movement for the head, or somewhat similar to the arc of the movement of the head. And I went ahead and just made these marks that represented the middle position of the head, which I decided to kind of do some easing, where the spacing of the head is closer together towards the beginning of the movement, and then it goes ahead and stretches out at the very end of the movement. That way, that specific stretch frame doesn't become so obvious. But then I go right back to doing something weird, and I create that blur effect that I mentioned I hated so much. It's really difficult. You have to really pay attention all the time to what's going on, the motion that's happening, because there is one moment where I even tried to do this blur effect that I've got going on the wrong side of an arm, which was surprising to me. So you always need to make sure that you understand the motion as you're in-betweening. Again, I've been using a lot of cloned objects, such as the forearm and the hand. There's a lot of quick movement around this point in the animation. There's only one frame that I'm kind of ashamed of, but by and large, I'm happy with the results. Anyways, guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you guys would like to get more notifications from me, feel free to click on the bell or follow me on Twitter. And if you guys would like to take a look at any more of my content, feel free to click on anything that's appearing on the screen right now. Thank you very much for your time.